What's up, my dear language learning master? Welcome to the Language Input Podcast, and specifically to episode number 17. And well, as you know, this is a podcast in which I'm going to talk about the most common beliefs or misconceptions when it comes to the language learning. I'm going to try to answer the most common questions as well, from how long it takes to learn a language, to what the best way is to learn a language, or the best resources for beginners, etc. All right, like a wide variety of topics related to language learning. All right, and as usual, I'm just gonna share my honest, realistic, and fact-based opinion on the topic. Yeah, and my goal with my whole project, and specifically with this podcast, is to help as many people as possible realize that we cannot learn any language while enjoying the process every step of the way. Yeah, I'm 100% confident that that's possible. And the process has nothing to do with what we've been taught pretty much our entire life. When it comes to language learning. But anyway, yeah. And finally, before getting started with today's topic, as usual, I'll be more than happy to read your comments. If you're listening to this on YouTube or any other platform where you can leave your messages, because it's always a pleasure to hear your feedback, and you give me ideas for future episodes as well, things that I hadn't thought of myself, etc. All right. So thank you in advance for that, and don't be shy to share your thoughts or your comments. All right. Okay, so let's go with today's topic. And today's topic is language apps. Yeah, they're pretty famous, aren't they? And well, I mean, the question I'm going to try to answer today is: are they useful, or is there a specific way to use them so we can take advantage of them to sort of, to not speed up the process, but to help us learn the language, whatever it is. All right. And well, first of all, I'm not a super expert on language apps because you're gonna hear that throughout this episode, but I'm not a big fan of them. All right, so I'm not a super expert. I want to be clear on that. All right, but the reason why I'm not a big fan of them is, first of all, I do think in general the idea is much better than what I call the traditional grammar approach, like traditional classes in which you're forced to learn the grammar rules consciously, memorize vocabulary lists, and so on. We all know about that, right? So I do think the idea is better than that, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a big expert in apps because I don't use them, but like a few years ago, before I started my project, and before knowing everything I know now about language learning, I did use Duolingo for quite a while with Polish, and I was consistent. I worked on it every day, so it's that wasn't the issue. But I don't know, it's just many things that just didn't seem right to me. And again, I do believe the experience or the idea is better than traditional grammar classes, but just the fact that you're translating sentences from one language to another, to me, that's not gonna really help you, because like I've talked about many times, the idea when learning a language is to sort of associate certain sounds in the target language with the mental representation of them in your mind, and not with the translation to your native language or whatever the language, right? Because all that's going to lead to is to translation in your mind whenever you're trying to speak, right? And that painful process of having to constantly think about everything you want to say when engaging in a conversation, right? And thus sort of, I'm sure you've all had that feeling when speaking in a foreign language, that you have to think about everything you want to say and your head hurts, like after half an hour of that process. So those are some of the consequences of that. So I don't really like that, to be honest. And then there's no context whatsoever. There's just isolated sentences or structures or chunks, little phrases. And to me, context is so key when it comes to learning languages. Whether that's a story, a game, or whatever it is. Just the context is going to help you understand so many new words that you wouldn't understand otherwise, right? I don't know, thanks to the context, thanks to real life examples that you can use within the context of a story. I don't know, just so many ideas. And the language apps just don't have that. They're just isolated pieces of language with no context whatsoever. So no, I'm not a big fan of that, to be honest. Yeah. And in general, the idea is that when I look at them, even though I believe the experience is a bit better than language traditional grammar classes, they're still sort of relying, or they're still thinking about the language learning process as isolated words or sentences, or I don't really know how to put it into words, but I mean, that's just not the way the language process works in our mind. It's the whole idea. I mean, the most important thing when engaging in a conversation or when listening to a story is to understand the message, to understand what's going on, right? And not only is that the most important thing, but that's the way we learn a language, if we understand what was being said to us, right? But because of traditional grammar classes and language apps as well, we're so focused on understanding specific words or what that specific word means, on paying attention to chunk or structure, when the idea, I'm always talking about it, but I don't know if that's possible 100%. But the idea when listening to a story, when reading, when doing something in a target language, is to kind of forget that you're listening to a different language, right? You're so involved in the story, or you're so entertained. You're having so much fun because of the story, because of the message, that you nearly forget that you're listening to a different language, right? Have you had that feeling before? I get it all the time, especially with the languages that I'm more fluent with, like English, or I don't know, Portuguese, when I'm watching series. It's just I'm so locked in. I'm so focused on the story, on the message, on the series, on what's going on why that character is crying, or what the other character is afraid of, or whatever the story is, that I nearly forget that I'm listening to a different language. And that's the ideal scenario, right? And little by little, I'm getting better at not paying conscious attention to specific words. You know what I mean? And so in that regard, I think language apps don't help us, because again, they're teaching us to consciously focus on specific words, even if the experience is better because they use pictures and it's a bit more fun than traditional classes, so you don't really have to memorize things or consciously learn rules, right? But it's still, that's the distinction, the key distinction for me, subconsciously acquiring the language because you're interested in the topic, in the message, in the story, versus consciously trying to learn new words or remember them, or focusing on specific structures, on the way the verbs are used in the sentence, etc. We need to understand that, fortunately, our, let's call it, subconscious brain is way more intelligent than we think. I mean, certainly way more intelligent than our conscious one, because I don't have the details of how it actually works, within. But if you're listening to a different language and you understand what you're listening to, the process is working. The brain's doing its thing. So you're learning the language. I always talk about it. It's at the end of the day, it's that simple. If you understand what you're reading, if you understand what you're listening to, you're learning the language. Period. And it's all a consequence of the traditional and dominant grammar approach. But we're so focused on consciously realizing the way verbs are used, or the way a specific word is used in a sentence, or why you use that or this or that in a sentence, or why do you use this specific verb in this situation, etc. When to me, that first of all is painful because you're always sort of trying to memorize things, getting stressed because you don't remember them, and so on, right? Whereas the other way around, if you're just focusing on understanding the message, again, which is the most important thing by far, you're just having fun. You're imagining, and that's why I'll talk about this in a future episode, specifically to this topic. But that's why I think stories are so wonderful. Like any kind of story, for that matter. It doesn't have to be science fiction stories or invented stories. Like anything in life that is interesting to us, okay, we can call it a story, and not isolated sentences or chunks like those language apps and even more traditional classes, right? And like I said, I'll talk about stories in a future episode, but because you're so interested in the story itself, like I said, it's just, you kind of forget that you're listening to a foreign language, right? And I don't know, you're so engaged with it, and because of the story you're listening to, you're sort of picturing the situation, the action, etc. in your mind, as opposed to paying attention to specific words, to form in general, right? And that's not only is that fun, but it's way more appropriate when it comes to learning a language, because you're picturing the story, you're picturing the action, you're picturing what's going on in your mind, and acquiring the words that go along with it at the same time, without you even realizing, which is amazing, right? Because there's no conscious work you have to do. So, well, like I said, I'll talk about stories in detail in a future episode, but that's the main reason why I think they're amazing. But I mean, if you look at it, any conversation you have with your friends, with your family, you create, or you talk about stories or things that happen to you, and that's a story itself, right? But anyway, I'll talk about that topic in the future. And to sum things up here, getting back to language apps, like I said, I haven't tried all of them. I mean, actually, the only one I've had extensive experience with is Duolingo, like I said, and that was a few years ago. So there might be some app out there that could be a little bit more interesting, but in general, from what I've seen, it's just the whole idea of focusing on form, on words, on sentences, as opposed to what those words mean, what the message is, the message the narrator is trying to convey, or whatever. That's the most important thing. So yeah, to sum things up, like I said, I'm not a big fan of them, and I mean, of course, you're more than free to use them if you think they're helping you. But I'm just giving you my opinion, and because like I said, I want to help as many people as possible, and I'm super passionate about languages. I spend several hours every single day learning languages, reading about what the best way to learn languages is, or reflecting, thinking about whether a specific idea or resource is interesting or not, etc. So uh, of course, this is up to you to the kind of resources you want to use. But I'm just giving you my perspective on it, and the perspective of a person that's, like I said, super passionate about languages and knows what he's talking about. But I'm obviously not right 100% of the time, as as every single human in this planet, right? But yeah, that's my opinion on them in general. So, well, thank you as usual for coming this far in this episode, for listening to the whole episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you some insight into this topic. And yeah, my dear language learning master, I'll see you in the next one, number 18. And like I said at the beginning, any idea, any question you may have, let me know, because I'll be more than happy to help you out, and you'll be giving me ideas for future episodes, which I'm grateful for in advance. And yeah, have a good day wherever you might be. Bye bye.